The first time was when I was about 17. The second time, I guess I was 22. And the third time, I was 26, but I turned 27 while I was there, which was pretty cool. So this first time, was really special. Well, I guess all three times have been pretty special, but this first time was in high school. I went with a class, well, not a class actually, a small group of people who were in my class. And thinking back on it, actually, it was kind of an interesting thing. The way that it worked was there was a teacher at the middle school, actually, who would take 8th graders on trips to Italy, basically. And it was one of those things, there are a handful of companies, as you may or may not know, in the United States that do these kinds of educational trips. And this was basically one of those. So much of the trip is kind of planned for you and organized, and it's really nice actually in that way. I'm sure it takes the pressure off the adults a lot, the teacher and the chaperones, because we had a bus and a guide and a bus driver. So, there's a bus driver whose job it was to basically just take us around Italy, and then the guide who was just with us the whole week we were there. And I'll say also, I did not go to a fancy high school by any stretch. I went to, in many ways, actually kind of the opposite of a fancy high school. So this was also a new experience for me in that I was doing something kind of extracurricular here that felt really special, but also really kind of premeditated in the best way. I felt like the adults who were involved were doing a really good job at trying to make sure that, despite our kind of run-of-the-mill public education, that we would get a little bit extra, which is really nice. And I feel like, my public school education was sprinkled with every now and again little things that I think really made it special and really augmented the whole thing. So I feel really lucky because of that. A lot of it was just a matter of, just kind of right place, right time. So there was this middle school teacher who took 8th graders, and mainly they were people who he either knew from his class, the class he taught, or they were some of the people on his wrestling team. So he was also the wrestling coach. But the year that I was a senior in high school, for one reason or another, he decided that he would take a handful of high school students as well. So there was a handful of 8th graders, and then there was a handful of high school seniors. And I think a lot of it was because he had a colleague who was also a wrestling coach, who had also become a science teacher at my high school. And this guy sort of was allowed to form, a small posse of high school seniors to go on the trip with the middle school teacher. So, okay. So those were the circumstances under which this occurred. And it took place, I think it was probably around spring break. I feel like it was around Easter or something like that. So really close to graduation. And, by that point, you're kind of spent on school, or at least I felt like I was. I was ready for a little bit of a vacation, or just, some time with my friends. So this was a really nice kind of break from school. It was fun too because amongst the people who went with me were my girlfriend at the time, which was fantastic, and a few other friends who I'd been friends with since middle school, or some of them elementary school actually. So I can't remember exactly how many of us there were. There must have been about, I don't know, maybe like 10 or so of us high schoolers, and then maybe 10 more middle schoolers. And we went basically on this kind of tour of Italy. So we flew into Milan, but we didn't spend any time there. So we immediately drove over to Venice, or close to Venice. We didn't actually drive across the water to Venice, but just on the other side of the water on the mainland of Italy. And essentially what we did is we went to Venice, Florence, and Rome. And we stopped at a few places in between, one of the places being Assisi. So that was pretty cool also. And it was a place that I returned to later in life. I think I went on the second and third times. In any case, this time we went to Venice, Florence, and Rome, and took a day trip to Assisi. And Venice was so much fun. Actually, they were all so much fun, but part of this that I think was really special for me is I'd only ever really been out of the country once by this point in my life, and I know that's more than a lot of people, but I had really wanted to go to Italy for a long time. My dad had spent time in Italy when he was in grad school, and as a result, he kind of spent a lot of time talking about Italy and how great Italy is, and I had heard all of these stories from his time there. So naturally, I really wanted to go for myself and kind of have some of those experiences as well. And I think, honestly, that was part of the reason why my parents agreed to it. I remember the trip being, it was like cost effective in that it was an all-inclusive kind of situation, but it also wasn't inexpensive exactly. But I think my dad in particular thought it was really important for me to have that kind of experience, especially before I went to college, to just, I don't know, kind of experience new things and have that kind of an experience with my friends. Anyways, I felt extremely lucky because I didn't have a lot of sort of things like that growing up. So it was really just meaningful and a lot of fun. You can imagine, too, being about to graduate. You're 17 and a half, about to graduate high school, and you get this opportunity to go on this really fun trip with your friends and girlfriend. And anyways, I think I'm probably belaboring the point here. So let's talk about Venice. Venice was the first place that we actually spent sort of proper time in, and we arrived, I think as people generally do, sort of right here in Piazza San Marco. And I have to apologize for the quality of this map. Actually, the map is fine. It's just the printing out of this map is not the best. My printer, I think, is a little low on toner. But this is actually just a copy of a map that I had on my wall when I was in high school. It's a really cool map, kind of vintagey map. So, anyways, we arrived here, and I think that's kind of a common drop-off point for people. So we were dropped off in St. Mark's Square, Piazza San Marco, and, we went to the church, and we had lunch kind of nearby, And I remember one of the first things we did is we got a chance to see glass blowing, which was really awesome, sort of traditional Venetian glass. And I had never seen glass blowing in person before this. I think I probably saw like a special on Mr. Rogers or something like that when I was growing up, but I'd never actually seen somebody do it in front of my face. And that was a lot of fun. Beautiful too, right? So different colored glass with really tasteful, kind of slightly ornate gold embellishment. So that was a lot of fun. And I think that was somewhere, I honestly can't even remember exactly where that was. That was long enough ago that some of the details I can't remember. But I think it was somewhere over here. And I remember going to lunch afterwards. And after lunch, the high schoolers were allowed to basically roam free. I think the middle schoolers had to stay with a chaperone or something like that, but for the high schoolers, we were allowed to basically just do what we wanted. So me and a handful of others decided we wanted to go get coffee somewhere and just hang out. So I asked our guide sort of a good direction to go. I just asked him to point me in a direction and we would go. And he pointed me kind of in this direction. So I guess south of where we were. I think we had lunch somewhere around here, or maybe it was up here. So I grabbed a map, one of those fold-out maps that you get when you're visiting, especially I feel like historical cities have those where they've got the little picture of various things, and it just makes it really easy to figure out where you want to go, because they got all the landmarks posted. And we weren't particularly interested in hitting a landmark per se, but we were interested in just finding a spot where we could hang out and have coffee and just, do the things that high schoolers like to do, just hang out. So we walked and we kind of made our way from somewhere over here, kind of down. And we ended up somewhere here, right on the edge of the canal. And at the time, I didn't really drink coffee. So it's not like I was jonesing for a cup of coffee or anything. But I did really want to experience coffee in Venice because I had heard that coffee in Venice was really good because of the water or what have you. And mind you, this was, I guess, kind of right at the beginning of the sort of third wave coffee thing, maybe even before. I don't really know. It was 2006, so it was a little while ago. So again, I wasn't after anything specific. I just knew that I wanted to try some coffee kind of outside of the context of the hotel. So lucky for us, once we got to the canal here, we kind of just stumbled upon a cafe, essentially, that was set up kind of just a tent, I guess, or a kiosk. And we all got coffee, and I think we all got cappuccinos. Maybe somebody got a double espresso or something. And we just hung out. I think we sat on the ledge here and just, let our legs hang over the edge, sort of dangle them over the water, and we just chatted. And I remember it being just a remarkably beautiful day. It was the middle of spring, and it was a really clear day, and we were just looking out across the canal to this other section here. And I mean, at a certain point, I don't really know how to describe it in a way that's going to be as meaningful as it was to us at the time, but it was great. So Venice was pretty cool. after Venice, we went to Florence. And I honestly can't remember if the story I'm about to tell you occurred in Florence or Rome. But now that I think about it for a second, I think it was Rome. So I went to Florence. That was a ton of fun. Went to the Uffizi Gallery. Saw the David. Saw a bunch of other things. Lots of fun. Super cool. Okay. Then we go to Rome. And in Rome, we do kind of the typical things. We go to the Forum, right? We go to the Colosseum. We do these things. But again, we had time in the afternoons to spend and just hang out. So afternoons and evenings. And I think we would meet with the whole group for dinner. But basically in the afternoon, you know, the way it worked was in the mornings we would have some sort of tour or tickets for the museum or something like that. And then in the evening, afternoon and evening, we would just hang out. And my girlfriend at the time, who was with me there, is severely allergic to both peanuts and tree nuts. And this was a relatively new allergy for her. So I think we were still all trying to remember that it was a thing. And I guess at the time also I didn't know a lot of people who had that kind of allergy. That's not an excuse. That's just saying that, I don't know. I was just being an absent-minded 17-year-old. And so there's a lot of hazelnut stuff in Italy, right? It's a popular flavor like Nutella is hazelnut. So hazelnut and chocolate. And I like that flavor. I love chocolate. I love hazelnut. I like sweet things. I have kind of a crazy sweet tooth. And I love ice cream. So obviously Italy's a great place to be if you like ice cream because there's a ton of gelato. So we were hanging out and it was the evening and we go and we get some gelato. And it's me and my girlfriend and maybe like 3 other friends. And I decided, kind of not thinking, again, absent-minded 17-year-old, I just kind of decided that I was going to get hazelnut gelato. And part of it was being absent-minded, but then I have to say part of it also was being from the United States. I was used to things generally being artificially flavored. So I actually didn't think that there would be much actual hazelnut in the gelato. And I don't even think there were hazelnut chunks. I think it was just hazelnut flavored, which is probably why I thought this, that it was just going to be artificial flavoring. So I eat the gelato. Obviously, my girlfriend doesn't eat the gelato. She has something else. And I don't know, probably about an hour later, I kiss her. I just happen to be, it's just like as a normal thing. Not as like a first time thing or anything like that. It was just like, I wasn't thinking about it. And I don't know, we were probably chatting or I don't know. So I kiss her. And kind of not thinking about it. And I think she was maybe not thinking about it also. But maybe about 15 minutes after that, her throat starts to swell. And we realize that what's happening is she's having what is slowly becoming kind of a massive allergic reaction to the hazelnut, whatever trace amount of hazelnut was remaining on my lips. So here we were. There were about 5 of us, 17, 18-year-old kids in Rome, and one of us is about to have this kind of massive allergic reaction. So we try not to freak out, but we got on the bus, because I think we had taken the bus, maybe the subway and the bus, I'm not sure, to the part of town that we were hanging out in for the evening. So we get on the bus, and we are taking it back to the hotel because we need to get back to the hotel because my girlfriend didn't have her EpiPen with her. Probably because she was not expecting that she was going to have this kind of massive allergic reaction. So she didn't have her EpiPen with her, like in her bag, but she had it at the hotel. So we take public transportation back to the hotel, but I mean, it wasn't running on time, or maybe it was. I'm not really sure, but it felt like it was taking forever to get back, and I was sitting next to her on the bus, of course, and as we were riding back, she was getting more and more swollen, and she was starting to fall asleep. So at this point, I was pretty worried. Of course, I didn't want anything bad to happen to my girlfriend, and then also I was thinking about how difficult it would be to have to explain to her parents that I had inadvertently killed her while we were in Italy. I think she ended up finding a Benadryl in her purse, so she was able to take a Benadryl and as a result kind of be less swollen, or at least slow the constricting of her throat as we were heading back. But she still looked like she was kind of in trouble. Luckily, we finally get back to the hotel, and she's got her EpiPen, and she's able to give herself the shot, and, you know, all is well. She ends up kind of just hanging out for the rest of the night. I think she goes to bed early, and by the next day she was fine. But looking back on this, it's actually kind of remarkable to me that any of this went down at all, or at least went down the way it did. Just even as I'm telling this story, I'm remembering how, I don't know, how kind of how little adult involvement there was, which I think is kind of funny. I just feel like nowadays that would have happened a little bit differently, but that's just kind of what happened. I also felt, so of course I felt bad for, because I'd caused this massive allergic reaction through my own self just being careless. And first of all, I wanted to make sure that she would recover okay, so she recovered. And then I was like worried that maybe she wouldn't want to be with me anymore because I had just sort of put her life in danger. Luckily for me, she was gracious about it, to say the least. So that ended up being okay. But it's definitely something that I got made fun of for a little while afterwards, which is fair, and I deserve that. But as a result, I since then have been very, very, very careful about asking people about their allergies. One of the things that I like to do now is bake. I really enjoy baking. I love baking bread, but I also enjoy baking sweet things. And I like baking for friends, but I always ask them now about their dietary restrictions and especially about allergies, because there's really nothing like almost killing your girlfriend when you're 17 years old to, I don't know, kind of shake you up. What's remarkable about that also, though, is that in a way that was such a small part of the trip, and I think that probably speaks to how much fun we had, that was just one amongst many adventures that we had there. Sort of coming back and looking back on it, it was something that some of my friends would tease me for, having kind of instigated that situation. But there were so many other awesome things that we did. At this point, too, I will say that since that was so long ago, a lot of those memories are more kind of a feeling than anything else. I don't remember a ton of the details anymore, but I do remember the general feeling of just feeling, I don't know, just really happy. And like I was having a great time, and that all my friends were having a great time too. And it was just an amazing trip. In many ways, it ended up informing decisions I made a little bit later in life. So when I started university later that year, I signed up for Italian class because I wanted to learn to speak Italian so that the next time I went, I would be able to speak the language. And I was, I'd say, moderately successful with that. I did study Italian in undergrad, and it wasn't my major or anything, but I took Italian classes. And when I visited the second time, right after college, when I was 22, I was able to speak with at least more fluidity than when I was 17. But it also kind of ignited this kind of wanderlust that I've continued to have throughout my life. I absolutely love traveling. And I liked traveling before my first trip to Italy, but after my first trip to Italy, I really liked traveling. And I think things that I was already interested in, like maps and different cultures and food and things like this, all became kind of augmented through my experience on that trip. I was also really interested, being exposed to all of that great sort of Western European art, sort of prompted me to take art history in undergrad as well. So I feel like, okay, so maybe this was the point. Maybe this is what my parents were thinking, is that, I would go and I would have these really cool experiences, and as a result, be really motivated to, take cool classes in college and really study hard. And in that way, I think it really worked. So yeah, that's my first trip to Italy. I know that's kind of rambly. And a lot of that is just because I don't remember a lot of those details because it was so long ago. But like I said, I remember having a great time, and I remember it having a really kind of important impact on my life. The second and third trips were a lot different, and just because they're more recent, I remember a lot more. Those trips I'd also like to tell you about. But I don't think that I'm going to tell you about that now. I think I'm going to save those for another time. And there are lots of other places that I've been to as well, and I would like to share those stories with you too. Those are also going to be a little bit less rambly because they're just more recent. Some of the places I've been to that I would like to tell you about are Mexico, Belize, Switzerland, France, Thailand, Japan. There might be a couple others too. If there's one of those that you would particularly like to hear about, please feel free to let me know in the comments, and maybe I can prioritize that one. Also, this time I'm using a slightly different setup for recording my audio. It's just a little bit more kind of analog and warm sounding. If you like it, let me know. I haven't decided yet if it's too much, if it sounds a little too warm, or if it's something that I'm going to keep doing. But if you like it, let me know. And if you don't like it, also let me know. I will say that for today, I am just holding my microphone because my mic stand is not up to the task. The mic I'm using today is pretty heavy, and my usual mic stand for this isn't robust enough to deal with it. So I'm gonna have to fix that. Although honestly, I do kind of like holding it, because this way I'm able to sort of like lean back and just kind of look at the ceiling as I'm thinking back on these memories. Anyways, thank you for joining me for this time together as I just kind of share some memories from childhood. I'm glad you were able to hang out with me for a little while. Again, let me know in the comments what you liked, what you didn't like. And I guess we'll see each other next time. Thank you.